Stonehenge is like a letter from the deep past. It's there, it's physical, you can't ignore it, but what does it mean?
So Stonehenge is very interesting in that it evolves over a very long period of time. The first thing that goes up at Stonehenge is not there anymore. It's the 56 holes that today are known as the Aubrey Circle.
How did prehistoric people, with no metal tools, no wheels, and no written language, move 25-ton stones hundreds of miles and arrange them with near-perfect astronomical precision? For centuries, Stonehenge has remained one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in human history. Massive stones, perfectly aligned, built with a precision that still raises questions today. Now, with the rise of artificial intelligence, researchers are analyzing patterns, alignments, and ancient data in ways never before possible. And what they're uncovering isn't just surprising, it's deeply unsettling, hinting that this monument may have served a purpose far beyond what we've ever imagined. If you're new here, subscribe and follow along. Let's get into it.
Previously unknown civilization living right here of Bronze Age people. And that's who built Stonehenge.
Why Stonehenge is still a mystery in 2025. You might think that after decades of excavation, satellite imaging, and academic research, we'd have Stonehenge pretty well figured out. We don't. Not fully. And understanding why we don't is the starting point for understanding why AI analysis is such a significant development. Stonehenge was built in multiple phases, starting around 3000 BCE and continuing until roughly 1500 BCE. That's a 1500-year construction project. Different groups of people, across many generations, kept coming back to the same spot and adding to, rearranging, and modifying the structure. Each phase used different materials, different techniques, and possibly had different purposes. Untangling all of that from the physical remains is extremely complicated. The two main types of stone present a separate puzzle each. The larger sarsen stones, the ones you picture when you think of Stonehenge, weigh up to 25 tons and came from Marlborough Downs, about 25 miles away. The smaller blue stones weigh up to 4 tons each and came from the Preseli Hills in Wales, roughly 150 to 200 miles away. Moving either of those across the landscape of prehistoric Britain without wheeled vehicles or draft animals capable of pulling that weight is a significant engineering challenge that researchers are still working to fully explain. Then there's the astronomical alignment. The monument is oriented to face the midsummer sunrise and the midwinter sunset with a precision that is too deliberate to be accidental. That alignment required careful observation, planning, and geometric knowledge. From a civilization we often picture as primitive, that level of intentional design demands an explanation. What AI is actually doing in Stonehenge research. Before we go further, it's worth being specific about what AI tools are actually contributing to Stonehenge research, because the headline, "AI Cracked Stonehenge," needs unpacking. AI in archaeology works primarily through pattern recognition across large data sets. Researchers feed AI systems satellite imagery, LiDAR scans, which use laser pulses to map underground features, geophysical survey data, isotope analysis results, and existing academic literature. The AI then identifies patterns, connections, and anomalies that human researchers might miss because the volume of data is too large for manual review at the same speed. One concrete example, LiDAR surveys of the landscape around Stonehenge have revealed dozens of previously unknown monuments, burial mounds, and earthworks in the surrounding area. Processing and interpreting all of that data manually would take years. AI-assisted analysis has dramatically compressed that timeline, allowing researchers to build a much more complete map of what the Stonehenge landscape actually looked like during its period of use. The Stonehenge Hidden Landscapes Project, a collaboration between multiple universities and research institutions, used exactly this kind of geophysical and remote sensing data to discover that Stonehenge sat at the center of a far more extensive ceremonial landscape than previously understood. Another application is isotope analysis. By analyzing the chemical signatures in human remains found at Stonehenge and the surrounding area, AI-assisted data processing is helping researchers trace where people came from, sometimes from surprisingly long distances. That research is actively changing the picture of who used Stonehenge and why. We'll come back to that. The stones themselves. In 2019, a study published in the journal Antiquity, led by researchers from University College London, used geochemical analysis to pinpoint the exact quarry sites in the Preseli Hills where the bluestones were cut. They identified two specific locations, Carn Godog and Rosifellen. What made this finding particularly striking was that the quarrying appeared to have happened around 3,400 to 3,200 BCE, meaning the stones sat in Wales for several centuries before they were moved to Stonehenge. The people who quarried them may not be the same people who transported them. These stones were old before they arrived. Why Wales? That question has driven significant research. One hypothesis, supported by analysis of the surrounding Welsh landscape, is that these specific outcrops had existing ceremonial significance before Stonehenge existed. Parker Pearson, one of the leading Stonehenge researchers at University College London, has suggested that a monument made of stones already considered sacred in their home location would have carried additional spiritual and social meaning when moved to a new site. The stones weren't just building material. They may have been objects of power, moved from one sacred place to another. The Sarsen stones present a different challenge. These massive blocks, some over 9 meters tall, came from a site called West Woods near Marlborough. A 2020 study in the journal Science Advances used portable X-ray fluorescence analysis to match the chemical signatures of the Stonehenge Sarsens to West Woods with high confidence. Moving 25-ton stones 25 miles across rolling terrain without wheeled transport suggests the use of wooden sledges, ropes, and organized labor on a scale that required significant social coordination. The engineering itself isn't impossible to replicate, but the social infrastructure required to organize it at that scale is what's genuinely impressive. The people who built it. For a long time, the popular image of Stonehenge's builders was something like isolated tribal groups, struggling to survive, occasionally dragging rocks around for reasons nobody fully understood. That image is being dismantled by recent research. Genetic and isotopic analysis of human remains from Stonehenge and the surrounding Neolithic landscape has revealed a surprisingly mobile and connected population. A 2022 study published in Nature examined ancient DNA from people buried near Stonehenge and found evidence of significant movement. Individuals buried at the site who had origins in other parts of Britain and potentially continental Europe. These weren't isolated communities. They were part of wider networks of people who traveled, traded, and shared cultural practices across large distances. Archaeologist Mike Parker Pearson's extensive work at Durrington Walls, a massive settlement site about 2 miles from Stonehenge, has revealed evidence of feasting on an extraordinary scale. Thousands of animal bones, predominantly from pigs and cattle, suggest that large gatherings of people from across Britain came together at the Stonehenge site, particularly during midwinter. These weren't small local events. The scale of the feasting evidence suggests organized pilgrimages involving people from hundreds of miles away. What AI-assisted analysis of isotope data is adding to this picture is the ability to track individual people's origins with more precision and at greater scale than was previously practical. When you map those origins across the landscape, you start to see that Stonehenge functioned as a gathering point for a geographically distributed community, a place where people from different regions came together around shared beliefs and practices. That's not primitive tribalism. That's organized religion, or something very close to it. The astronomical alignment. The fact that Stonehenge is aligned with the midsummer sunrise and midwinter sunset has been known for over a century. But recent AI-assisted analysis of the site's geometry is revealing that the astronomical precision embedded in the design goes deeper than that basic alignment. Researchers have used computational modeling, essentially AI-assisted geometric and astronomical analysis, to examine the full layout of the monument. What they've found is that the positions of various stones encode multiple astronomical relationships simultaneously. The station stones, 4 outlying markers that once stood around the main circle, are positioned in a way that captures relationships between the solar and lunar cycles. That kind of multi-layered astronomical encoding requires a sophisticated understanding of both celestial mechanics and geometry. Clive Ruggles, Emeritus Professor of Archaeoastronomy at the University of Leicester and a leading authority on ancient astronomical monuments, has published extensively on the astronomical knowledge embedded in Stonehenge and comparable sites. His work, combined with computational analysis tools, suggests that the builders had accumulated generations of careful sky observation before they began construction. The alignment wasn't a happy accident. It was the result of long-term, systematic observation passed down through communities over time. There's also a broader landscape alignment to consider. The avenue, a processional earthwork leading away from Stonehenge toward the river Avon, follows a natural geological feature called a periglacial ridge that happens to be naturally aligned with the midsummer solstice sunrise. Recent research has suggested that this natural alignment may have been what originally drew people to this specific location in the first place. The builders didn't create the alignment from scratch. They may have recognized an existing one in the landscape and built around it. That's a level of environmental observation and intentional site selection that reflects serious intellectual sophistication. The hidden landscape. Here's one of the most consistently surprising aspects of modern Stonehenge research. The more thoroughly the surrounding area is scanned, the more is found. The visible monument is only a fraction of what exists. The Stonehenge Hidden Landscapes project, which ran from 2010 to 2014 and used a combination of ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, and other remote sensing techniques, discovered over 17 previously unknown ritual monuments buried beneath the surface. These included buried timber circles, long barrows, and pit alignments, some of them immediately adjacent to the existing monument. That project's data has continued to be analyzed and reanalyzed, and AI-assisted pattern recognition is still extracting new findings from it years later. In 2020, archaeologists working with the Stonehenge Hidden Landscapes team discovered a massive circle of pits about 2 miles from Stonehenge, surrounding the nearby Henge Monument at Durrington Walls. The pit circle is approximately 1.2 miles in diameter and contains at least 20 large shafts, each around 10 meters wide and 5 meters deep. Dating suggests these pits were dug around 2500 BCE, contemporaneous with the main phase of Stonehenge construction. Their purpose isn't fully understood, but their scale and precision suggest they were deliberately designed to mark or contain something important. What AI-assisted analysis is doing with all of this new data is helping researchers understand the spatial relationships between different monuments across the broader landscape, how they were positioned relative to each other, which ones align with astronomical events, which ones are connected by earthworks or natural features. What's emerging is the picture of an organized, intentional landscape design covering dozens of square miles, not just one impressive monument on a hill. Who were the builders? The people who built Stonehenge belonged to what archaeologists call the Neolithic and early Bronze Age periods in Britain. But those labels can make them sound more homogeneous than they actually were. AI-assisted genetic analysis is revealing a more complex population story. Around 2500 BCE, the period when the main Sarsen structure was erected, Britain experienced a dramatic population shift. Studies published in Nature and other journals have used ancient DNA to show that a new population, associated with what's called the Beaker culture, arrived in Britain from continental Europe and rapidly became dominant. Within a few generations, the genetic makeup of the British population had changed significantly. The people who completed Stonehenge in its most recognizable form were genetically largely different from the people who started it. This doesn't mean the monument was abandoned and then taken over. The evidence suggests continuity of use alongside population change. The incoming Beaker people appear to have adopted and continued practices associated with Stonehenge, including burial at the site. What that transition actually looked like on the ground, whether it was gradual integration, replacement through disease, or something more complex, remains an active area of research. But it means Stonehenge was built and used by multiple genetically distinct populations over its long history, which complicates simple narratives about who built it. What connects all of these populations is the site itself. Whatever Stonehenge meant, as a ceremonial center, an ancestral landmark, an astronomical calendar, or all of these things simultaneously, it retained that meaning across major population changes. Different groups of people, from different cultural backgrounds, kept returning to it and treating it as significant. That kind of cultural continuity across demographic change is something that archaeologists don't fully understand yet. Stonehenge as a place of the dead. One of the most compelling pictures emerging from recent research is of Stonehenge as a monument specifically associated with the dead and the ancestors. Excavations at Stonehenge have recovered the cremated remains of at least 58 individuals, buried over a period of approximately 500 years from around 3000 to 2500 BCE. Isotope analysis of those remains, published in a 2018 study in the Journal of Archaeological Science, revealed that at least 10 of those individuals did not grow up near Stonehenge. Some had isotope signatures consistent with origins in Wales, the same region bluestones came. The idea that some of the people buried at Stonehenge came from the same area as some of the stones is one of those findings that stops you in your tracks. Parker Pearson has proposed that Stonehenge was a monument to the ancestors, a place where the dead were brought from across Britain to be interred, and where the living gathered to connect with those ancestors during major seasonal events. In this reading, the bluestones may have been brought from Wales because that region was already associated with the dead and with ancestral power. The monument itself was a bridge between the living and the dead, and the stones were participants in that relationship, not just building materials. AI-assisted isotope analysis is allowing researchers to process much larger sets of remains data than was previously practical, which means the geographic picture of where Stonehenge's dead came from is becoming steadily more detailed. What it's showing is that people traveled significant distances to be buried there, which tells you something powerful about what this place meant to the people who used it. It wasn't a local cemetery. It was a destination. How did they actually do it? Let's spend some time on the engineering, because even with everything AI analysis has revealed about the why of Stonehenge, the how remains one of the most fascinating puzzles. Moving the bluestones from Wales, a minimum of 150 miles across varied terrain including water crossings, required either land transport, sea transport, or some combination of both. Experiments conducted by researchers at the University of Exeter, published in the journal Antiquity, demonstrated that moving a 1-ton bluestone replica on a wooden sledge over grass required a team of around 10 people and was physically feasible. Scaling that up to the actual stones and accounting for the terrain between Wales and Wiltshire would have required significant organized labor, but was within the capability of a motivated Neolithic community. The sea route hypothesis has gained traction in recent years. Researchers have proposed that bluestones were moved by raft or boat along the Welsh coast, around the tip of Cornwall, or through the Bristol Channel, and then up river systems toward the Salisbury Plain. Experimental archaeology projects have tested elements of this route. The calculations suggest it's possible, though requiring considerable navigational skill and planning. For a coastal and riverine population, which the Neolithic British appear to have been, based on settlement patterns, that kind of water transport may have been far more routine than we've assumed. The sarsen stones present a different problem. At 25 tons, they are too heavy to float and too large to move easily on wooden sledges without a massive labor force. AI-assisted modeling of the terrain between Westwoods and Stonehenge has helped researchers identify the most likely routes, ones that avoid the steepest gradients and make use of natural valleys. The conclusion from this modeling is that a route of approximately 25 miles was physically manageable, but would have required a coordinated effort involving hundreds of people over multiple days per stone. With roughly 80 sarsen stones originally present at the site, the cumulative labor investment is staggering. The acoustic properties. Researchers at the University of Salford, working with the British Academy, have conducted extensive acoustic analysis of Stonehenge, both the existing monument and a full-scale replica built in New Zealand called Maryhill. What they found is that the stone arrangement creates distinctive acoustic effects, sound bouncing between the stones in ways that amplify and modify voices and percussion. Inside a complete version of Stonehenge, as it would have existed when all the stones were standing, the acoustic properties would have been dramatically different from the open landscape outside. A study published in the Journal of Archaeological Science in 2020 by acoustic archaeologist Bruno Fazenda and colleagues found that the original complete monument would have produced reverberation effects similar to those found in small concert halls. Sounds made inside would have been amplified, distorted, and contained in ways that would feel distinctly different from normal outdoor sound. For ceremonies involving chanting, drumming, or vocal performance, those acoustic properties would have made the interior of Stonehenge a genuinely immersive sensory environment. Whether this was intentional, whether the builders understood and designed for the acoustic effects, is genuinely unknown. It's possible that the acoustic properties emerged from structural requirements and were a welcome discovery rather than a planned feature. But it's also possible that the builders, through experience with the site during construction, recognized and valued those properties. When you combine the visual drama of the stone arrangement, the astronomical alignments, and the acoustic effects, you get a picture of a space deliberately designed to produce powerful sensory and psychological experiences in the people who gathered there. The midwinter connection. Most people associate Stonehenge primarily with the midsummer solstice, the dramatic sunrise alignment on the longest day. But recent research, including AI-assisted analysis of the faunal remains from Durrington walls, suggests that midwinter may actually have been the more significant gathering time. Analysis of the pig and cattle bones from the Durrington walls feasting deposits, conducted by a team including Umberto Albarella from the University of Sheffield, found that most of the animals had been slaughtered in midwinter, around December. The isotope signatures of the bones confirmed that many of the cattle had been born in spring and slaughtered after about 9 months, placing their deaths in late autumn to early winter. This suggests that the major gatherings at the Stonehenge landscape happened primarily in the winter months, not the summer. Midwinter makes a certain kind of sense as the primary ceremonial focus. In a pre-agricultural or early agricultural society in Northern Europe, midwinter was a period of genuine existential anxiety. The days were getting shorter. The cold was intensifying. Food stores accumulated over the summer and autumn were being depleted. The moment of the winter solstice, when the sun reaches its lowest point and then begins its return, would have been profoundly meaningful. The stone circle's alignment with the midwinter sunset means that from inside Stonehenge, you can watch the sun set directly between the 2 tallest trilithon stones on the shortest day of the year. That view was not accidental. The picture this builds is of a monument where communities gathered in the cold and the dark of midwinter, brought their dead to be interred, feasted on animals they had raised through the year, and watched the sun reach the lowest point of its annual cycle and begin to return. Whatever the specific beliefs involved, the emotional and psychological function of that gathering seems legible even 4,000 years later. It was about collective survival, about renewal, about demonstrating that the community was still here, still together, still watching the same sky. The terrifying part, what this says about us. The terrifying part is not a monster or a conspiracy. It's the recognition of how completely we misread our own past. For centuries, the dominant narrative about prehistoric people was built on an assumption of primitive simplicity. These were people who hadn't figured out writing yet, who lived in scattered communities, who didn't have sophisticated tools. The idea that they could design and execute a centuries-long engineering project with precise astronomical alignments and a pan-British social network simply didn't fit that narrative. So the assumption was that they probably didn't, hence the alien theories, the lost civilization theories, the Merlin theories. What the actual research reveals is that the assumptions were wrong. The people who built Stonehenge were fully modern humans in every cognitive sense. They had the same brains we have. They were capable of long-term planning, systematic observation, complex social organization, and the kind of sustained collective effort that requires shared beliefs, leadership structures, and supply chains. They did all of this without writing, without metal tools, and without the accumulated technological knowledge of all the civilizations that came after them. They did it through direct knowledge, careful observation, and social structures we're only beginning to understand, and that's where the unsettling feeling comes from. We built a story about human progress that required the people who came before us to be lesser, simpler, more primitive, limited. That story made our achievements feel unique. What the Stonehenge evidence shows, and what AI analysis keeps making harder to ignore, is that the story was mostly self-flattery. The capacity that built modern civilization was always there. It expressed itself differently at different times, with different tools. But the mind behind it, the curiosity, the social complexity, the desire to understand the sky and connect the living to the dead, that was present long before anyone wrote a single word. What researchers still don't know. We still don't know the specific beliefs of the people who built it. We can infer a great deal from the physical evidence. The astronomical alignments suggest the sun and its cycles were important. The burial evidence suggests a focus on ancestors and the dead. The feasting evidence suggests communal gathering. But the specific mythology, the ritual practices, the social hierarchies involved are largely invisible to us. These were pre-literate cultures. They left no written record of what they believed or what Stonehenge meant to them in their own words. We also don't know exactly why the monument went out of active use. By around 1500 BCE, the evidence for active construction and modification at Stonehenge largely stops. The Bronze Age communities that followed the monument's main construction phase don't appear to have added to it in the same way. Whether this represents a change in religious practice, a collapse of the social networks that supported the monument, climate change affecting population and agriculture, or something else entirely, is not clear. AI analysis of the broader Bronze Age landscape may eventually help answer this question, but right now, it remains open. The specific mechanics of some of the most impressive construction phases are also still debated. How the lintels, the horizontal stones resting on top of the uprights, were raised to their current height is not definitively settled. Proposed methods include timber ramp systems and staged wooden platforms, and experimental archaeology has tested versions of both. But without a written record or a clear physical trace of the construction process itself, the exact method remains a question mark. These gaps don't undermine the significance of what has been found. They're a reminder that archaeology is an ongoing process, and that AI tools are accelerating that process, but not completing it. Where this research goes next. The next phase of Stonehenge research is going to be driven significantly by advances in the tools available to archaeologists, and AI is central to that. Ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR technology are becoming increasingly precise, which means the underground landscape around Stonehenge will continue to yield new discoveries. The pit circle near Durrington Walls, discovered in 2020, is still being actively studied. Other anomalies detected in geophysical surveys are waiting for more detailed investigation. With AI helping to process and interpret the data coming from these surveys, the pace of discovery is expected to continue accelerating. Ancient DNA analysis is advancing rapidly. The cost of sequencing ancient genomes has dropped dramatically over the past decade, making it possible to analyze many more individuals from the Stonehenge landscape than was previously affordable. AI-assisted genomic analysis is allowing researchers to build detailed pictures of family relationships, migration patterns, and population dynamics across the Neolithic and Bronze Age periods. Within the next decade, we may have a much clearer picture of the specific social structures that organized Stonehenge's construction, who held authority, how that authority was transmitted, and how the communities involved were related to each other. There's also growing interest in applying AI tools to the analysis of the landscape and architecture in combination, looking not just at what the physical evidence shows, but at what choices the builders made when alternatives were available. When you model the options available to Neolithic builders and compare them to the choices they actually made, you get insight into their priorities and values. Why this stone and not that one? Why this alignment and not that one? Why this location and not another? Those questions, approached through AI-assisted modeling, may eventually give us access to something approaching the decision-making process of the people who built one of the world's most enduring mysteries. AI isn't solving Stonehenge with a single dramatic revelation, it's doing something more valuable. It's building a detailed, evidence-based picture of a prehistoric civilization that was far more organized, connected, and intellectually sophisticated than we've given it credit for. The mystery isn't disappearing, it's getting richer, and every new finding quietly challenges the story we've told ourselves about how smart and capable people had to become before they could do something truly remarkable. If the people who built Stonehenge were just as mentally capable as we are today, what do you think they understood about the world that we might have completely forgotten? Leave your answer below.